All right. Hey, off we go. Welcome, everybody. My name is Jesse Randall. I'm the founder and CEO of Sweater, who is your host here for Founder Saga. I'm excited to have Kris with us from Sendoso. He's coming to us from Mexico this time. And, I got to appreciate how awesome it is that we can communicate with each other anywhere in the world. It's really great for Kris to be making some time for us. Sweater's objective in all of this is to educate and provide some both insight as well as inspiration to what we consider one of the hardest parts of starting a company, which is going from the back of the napkin to your first outside revenue, or to getting to sustainable revenue where you're not eating out of your freezer every single day anymore. So many of us have been in the trenches or are currently in there. And so it's great to understand what it's really like to be there and to empathize with others like Kris that have gone through it, but to also know that you can make it out the other side. So we're excited to hear more of Kris's story. And Kris, welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Jesse. I'm excited for this one.
Yeah. So we always start these by trying to get a good feel for what Sendoso is. Now, I know that you'll explain this way better than I will. So I'm going to let you give us the quick, 60-second pitch of what Sendoso does and how you position yourselves in the market.
Yeah. So we position ourselves as a sending platform, which ultimately helps customers send out direct mail, corporate gifts, could be swag, could be handwritten notes, really limitless options, and really helps build relationships with prospects, customers, and employees. So
that's great. So, and this is all automated, right? So this is the kind of thing that like plugs into a CRM, right? And that you as a salesperson working at XYZ company, you want to send some baseball tickets. Well, I guess you can't do that these days, but send a handwritten note to one of your prospects. It's integrated right into your CRM, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So we have integrations into like Salesforce and other CRMs, as well as marketing automation tools, sales engagement tools like the Outreach and SalesLoft and Groove. Really, our goal is to integrate into where the tools our current customers are using, both for purposes of making it a part of current workflows, but then also data in, data out, so we can do better reporting based on the data that we're able to push in and then take out from that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's so smart that you chose to integrate directly into the CRM systems, whatever those platforms are, and be where the team's already operating. I'm sure that really greatly accelerated your success. So give us an idea of like what kind of volume you're working with here, and then I want to talk more about the nature of this physical aspect of your SaaS platform, right? Because it's something that most SaaS companies don't deal with. So just give us an idea of kind of where you're at in terms of customers, or like what kind of order volume do you typically see, whatnot.
Yeah, so we've sent well north of 1 million things in the last few years. We've got getting close to about 1,000 enterprise customers. We've got about 300 plus employees, not including all of our warehouse workers and staff. And then we've raised about 55 million to date. Yeah,
that's awesome. Money in the bank, that's always nice. So at what point, just kind of provide context, I guess, how long were you operating before you brought in outside funding?
Yeah, so it was actually the original goal was to kind of bootstrap it and run off revenues in the early days. So it was about, I'd say, probably about 1.5 years of kind of bootstrapping it, of which there was really a solid like 6 months of kind of when I say really bootstrapping, I mean like things were tight and we were really trying to hire new employees based on customer revenue and try to do that math. And so yeah, we then decided that we just had too much demand and we needed to hire more people, and so then we went down the path of VC fundraising.
It's the best way to go. Start with bootstrapping first, and when demand outstrips your ability to fulfill it, then go bring in some financing partners. Yeah, you get way better terms that way too, right? Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so we'll come back to that, and we're going to dive deeper into that area in a minute. But let's take a quick trip back in time and tell us about how this originally started. I mean, you mentioned to me quickly, you started with something kind of different, at least from my perspective, what that starting point was. So tell us about the beginning. Like, where were you? What were you doing? Were you working somewhere? Give us a quick view.
Yeah, so my background is in sales. So I was an account executive or various sales roles for about 8 years before starting Sendoso. And it was at my company right before starting Sendoso at TalkDesk, a company that I worked at for a couple of years. And I was in sales, and I was trying to get creative, figuring out how to break into more accounts. And so I was doing kind of creative things like sending out Starbucks gift cards. I'd send out handwritten notes. I'd kind of steal swag from the swag closet. Marketing would hate it. But of all those things, I thought the Starbucks gift card piece was kind of interesting, but it was kind of a manual, annoying thing to try to send out like a Starbucks e-gift card. And I'd even try to go to starbucks.com and buy e-gift cards from them. And it would take me like 3 days to get their, like the final e-gift link back. And so that was kind of the precipice for the first iteration of Coffee Sender, which ultimately turned into Sendoso.
Oh, that's awesome. So how long was it Coffee Sender before you switched to Sendoso?
So it was about a year Coffee Sender, of which probably about 9 months of that it was a side project, something that was just beer money. And the goal was to really just, drink free beer. That was, and the model was like for every Starbucks card we sent, we made $1. And so, if I could get, 10 Starbucks cards that day, that's an extra $10. That's some beer money. And so it started off like that. And then, I had a co-founder come in who actually quit his job to start selling Coffee Sender before I even quit my own job. And then it was about a couple months of me at Coffee Sender before then pivoting into Sendoso.
Okay, gotcha. So, I mean, to be sustainable at $1 a piece, I mean, that's a lot of gift cards to be sending out.
Well, yeah. So that's really when I realized after I quit my job and I was like, did the math that we were going to need to be doing billions of sends to become a big company. And it was like something like 10 times the amount of Starbucks cards Starbucks actually sold each year was what we like had math of. And so it just didn't make sense. So it was never going to be a big business. But it was an amazing starting ground to what turned into Sendoso, and we really learned a lot from building a product from this too.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, I mean, let's dive in there. So, you said you're doing this kind of like beer money on the side. So, I guess, like, how were you doing the operations and all that kind of stuff? Were you sending physical cards, or were they all digital and you're just emailing them out to people? Like, tell us about the initial product. Like, how were you handling it while you were working?
Yeah, so it was actually the first Coffee Center was all digital. So that was all email based. So it was much easier than Sendoso with our physical warehouses around the world. But while I was working, I mean, instead of, going out on a Thursday night, I would stay in and spend a few hours at night working with our engineers that were overseas and just continuing to build the product and fixing some things. And it was more of an automated tool where, self-service sign up. But it was, in the early days, it was, I was the sole product manager or founder that had to build it out. So there was a lot of nights and weekends building it out.
Nice. So were you building this yourself, or were you're managing somebody else?
So I was managing someone else. So really, I was inspired by the idea. I started, my first step was really, okay, I'm going to go grab some printer paper from the printer, and I'm just going to draw what it could look like. So basically draw out like 30 screens of what a Salesforce app could look like, and then what a coffeecenter.com web app could look like to create an account and put in your credit card and a couple simple things like that. So that was kind of like the first step. Then I went into this tool called Mockflow, which is kind of a similar like Balsamic or one of those like mock-up tools, built out some mock-ups and kind of visually was prepared to kind of get this built. I didn't know any engineers at the time that were able to build this for me. So I thought what was the next best thing and looked at Odesk, which is now Upwork, and put on a proposal to say, build me a Salesforce app and a website. And I had like something like 40 bids and chose this final one that was $5,000 and took $5,000 out of my personal credit card and just and put it into Upwork and went for it.
So do you feel like you got lucky when you did that? I mean, it seems like a hard thing to find a good partner to do that level of work at that price on Upwork. Do you feel like you got lucky, or like, could you have made anything work?
I would say both. I could have made anything work, but I also got lucky. I think I've heard stories where people get burned from, freelancers, but just the same as you could have I've had friends who have co-founders that end up, being person-to-person co-founders in San Francisco and bail and go do something else. So I think you have a risk no matter what you do. Maybe my situation was, and I think as a side project, I was able to have, some full-time resources versus in some cases you have these side projects that get started with a side engineer who only wants to spend an hour, a week building. And so at least for me, I had a dedicated person that was their job was to build this. And I think that was helpful instead of just like trying to convince an engineer to kind of build it on the side.
You're right. It is super challenging to try to get someone to work for sweat equity, no doubt. Yeah. So when you're working at that price point, I mean, you mentioned to me earlier that you're a sales guy getting into product management.
Yes.
So what was, tell me about the struggle there. Like, what was that learning curve like?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like I knew what I wanted visually. And so, but I didn't know all of like, I didn't use Jira at the time. I wasn't doing PRDs. It was basically like some mock-ups that then turned into a Google Doc that then turned into a Trello board. And that was the gist of it. And that got us to version 1. So it was more of the fact that I was confident enough that I could tell someone that this is what the final product could look like. And please build it. And that kind of worked out great for me. At least, and I'm talking about Coffee Center version 1, which was the 5,000. Then I, realized that version 1, there's no such thing as like version 1 and done. So it was like, as soon as we got a customer, there was, either a bug or a feature improvement. So then I was like, well, let's do version 2. And then that was, I think we did another like 10 grand for version 2, which was all this feature creeping, all these other things that I probably didn't need. Half of them we ended up throwing out anyway. But, it was definitely a good solid version 2 that then ended up going into like an hourly work instead of project work, which was easier to bite off on.
Right. So I love the process that you're going through here, because I mean, I run into so many founders that they have their big vision, right, of what they want.
Yeah.
And they want to build that first. And I like the process you went through because you were very deliberate. I mean, you had real constraints to what you had to build. I mean, even if it's just budgetary, right, that you had to constrain yourself. So in that mentality, I mean, certainly there must have been something about that product that probably had a manual component to it, or otherwise, you're having to like kind of pull the levers yourself. It wasn't clearly what you wanted in the long run. So like, how did you hold it together, like to actually get the product to work? What else were you doing to get that ecosystem working?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of interesting because I would go and buy Starbucks gift cards in bulk from Starbucks.com, get this spreadsheet, then load it up into our database. And I have to like make sure that there was not like run on the bank. So like if someone was about to send like 1,000 of these, if I only had, not enough. So there was that dilemma in the early days, and it was all like kind of manual. And then, I was, trying not to, I would basically try to not spend any time during the day, but just enough time at night that would just keep it afloat, because I had a day job. So I needed to do my day job, and I didn't want to spend 1 minute during the day on this. So it was all nights and weekends.
Gotcha. So, I mean, the automated components where you had some kind of interface that someone could come to your website, put in an order, and then, what is it, like how many gift cards they wanted, and then it would just send them the email? Or
it was actually just the main use case was you install the Salesforce app, and then you have a little button that says send coffee on any contact or lead record in Salesforce, and you'd click it and it says add a message. You add a message, you click send, and then the recipient gets an email saying here's a coffee and here's a little message, and then you got the link for the Starbucks card, and then it logged.
Oh, that's awesome. So yeah, so the initial product was actually full on into Salesforce. That's awesome. I didn't realize.
Yeah. First, like my, Odesk or Upwork job description was like, build me a Salesforce app and then a web app to kind of partly manage it. And so that was.
that's great. Yeah. So what kind of volume did you end up getting to by the time you decided that you wanted to branch out into other product categories?
Yeah. So it was about $300,000 or $400,000, which was good enough. That was like showed traction that people were willing to send stuff. And it was kind of like a perfect epiphany where at the time, my co-founder, Braden, he quit his job to start selling Coffee Center full time. I thought he was crazy because I thought Coffee Center was a beer money, not a real-time job. he kind of proved me different and was able to just continue to get big companies to start using it. And then I was also at the same time at Talktis feeling some pain trying to do direct mail and gifts, and marketing was like sending us spreadsheets to write notes in a spreadsheet, and it was like taking 3 weeks for them to send out the direct mailers. And so I was like, well, why isn't there like an easy button to like click and send this out and like automate it? And so that was like I have this coffee button. Why don't I use this coffee button for sending other things besides coffee? And our customers were asking. So that's when the light bulb went off on like, okay, well, let me quit my job. There's no way I'm going to be able to figure out how to build a warehouse infrastructure and scale out sending anything on the side. So then I quit my job, and then we spent about 9 months kind of back in square zero and rebuilding Sendoso. Meanwhile, Coffee Center was still bringing in enough profit that it kind of bootstrapped it from those revenues. So that was like a nice early way to not have to go back to my bank account too much or go to investors too early.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that period of time between when you quit your job and you rebuilt Sendoso, I mean, I guess how long did it take to build your full? I mean, it's not even MVP. I don't know what you would call it at this point. I mean, you're in market. You quit your job. You're generating sounds like tens of thousands of dollars a month in revenue, just on the coffee side. So, I mean, were you patient? You know, did you feel like you had time to build it the way you wanted, or were you feeling a lot of pressure because you were pushing revenues over to building the new product? Like, what was that thought process like when you were building?
Yeah, so I've always been a fan of like building version ones and getting it to market quicker and then getting customer feedback and just selling it. So it was, what is like what is the minimal thing that we can build that, has the warehousing component that allows you to send stuff, order, swag, and, a big enough catalog of gifts, good enough integration into Salesforce at the time too. We also built out some other integrations into Marketo. We kind of hacked together an integration with SalesLoft and Outreach way before they even like had an idea that they wanted integrations into their platform. So that was kind of the first version, and ultimately I was building for myself. So I was like, what is the tool? What is the best tool I can have that's the minimalist I can have that I could use and be happy with, without like getting too feature intensive.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, feature creep, that's legit. Okay. That's great. So I think the path that you took to create your product is, I mean, I wouldn't say there's a textbook for anything in startups, but you took a really smart path. I mean, in terms of efficiency and being able to sell as you went along and build what customers were demanding instead of trying to predict what they wanted. I love the way you built this product. It's awesome.
Yeah, no, it was definitely very interesting. Definitely some learnings because, prior to this, I had no product experience being in sales. So I really had to figure out what to do every day. And it was quite the learning curve, but, I think it's turned out great. So
yeah. So somewhere along the way, there must have been a bump when it came to the product, when something didn't turn out right, or there were delays or whatever. I mean, if you were to think back, I mean, what was one of the more major, was there anything on the level of crisis when it came to the product, or was it just smooth sailing the whole time?
No, there was definitely crises. I would say from a product standpoint, we definitely had a couple of things happen. One is we'd had huge surges of usage. And so if we had gone down because we had too much usage on our platform, to our engineers at the time, 100% were in Pakistan. And so if this was 2 p.m. on a Friday, 2 p.m. on a Friday in San Francisco, that's 2 a.m. their time, and we didn't have anyone to fix it. So we would have to wait till like 5 p.m. to have a fix up. So there is early days where there was 3-4 hours of downtime and there was nothing we could do. We had 100% of our engineers overseas, even through Series A. So we convinced one of them post Series A to work US hours just for when we needed a quick hot fix. But that was an interesting dynamic of like no engineers to fix things. And we just had to wing it.
Right. Yeah, no, that's scary. I mean, especially if the product goes down. So you actually had like outages on the product,
We would have some
not
early
just like inventory outages, but just like the product's not working.
product would, yeah, we'd have a bug that would take the product down or be a key part of it that wouldn't work. And so we just would have to deal with it. And this was not frequent, but it was definitely one of those memories that was like, if that happened, even once a quarter or something, it was still like ingrained in my head. And definitely something that was kind of crazy. So.
Yeah. So I want to talk about your development team, especially as a non-technical founder. I mean, I think you're one of the few success stories of non-technical founders being overseas and like working with a complete overseas team with no technical lead here, that things have gone pretty smoothly. I mean, you said that you all your engineers were overseas through your Series A. That's amazing to me.
Yeah.
So what did you discover? Like, what's your secret? Like, is there anything in particular? Was someone trying to like guide you, or did you just do a good job of managing it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I built some really good rapport with kind of what I would say is our VP of engineering over there. At the time, he was kind of my main contact for an engineer. And we just became kind of like virtual best friends. It was actually probably about 3 years before I even visited him in person. But it was like, I trusted him and he trusted me, and we were going to make this work. And so, he had great work ethic and was able to also help hire new people. So the nice thing was about a 30-person development firm. And so as we continued to grow, we added another person from their team and another person till we ended up bringing them all in-house under our name. But in the early days, it was nice because it was trustworthy. They were very communicative. I talked to them every night at like 11 p.m. my time. And we just got in a sync and a habit of just making it work. So
that's amazing. I mean, we don't need to
have some advisors. So I would say that I did surround myself with some engineering advisors who would do some code audits, who did some code reviews, and was like, okay, these guys are legit. This looks good. So that gave me a little bit of peace of mind, especially we had some audits for I think our Series A VC wanted to like take a look behind the scenes, because by the time we got to Series A, we were like 5 million in SaaS ARR. So the traction story was like amazing. We were selling this thing like it was, like it was the best thing ever. And also because me and my co-founder were both sales, we were able to build a nice sales engine early on. But, it was something where the story was, okay, you found product market fit, obviously, but what's this engineering team doing over here? So that was, I think it was a blessing and a curse. It's also very cost effective. So we weren't burning a ton of money. It's about probably 4 or 5 engineers to every 1 engineer in San Francisco in terms of costs. So that was also very helpful in the early days of keeping burn down, and using, we were profitable for the first year and a half and able to push a lot of our revenues back into growth. So.
Yeah, well, and that's fantastic being able to do that. So to dive in a little bit more on that Series A conversation, so was it the firm that ended up leading your round? Was the one that wanted to look behind the curtain? Was anybody else skeptical of how you built the product? Anyone else that you were talking to?
Yeah, I mean, everyone was kind of, in the sense of like, in terms of the VC world.
Sure. Yeah.
The seed investors were, but again, even by the time we went to get a 2 million seed, we already had, I think, a near $1 million in revenue in the bank, which is like some companies take, years to get $1 million. And so it was the story was definitely product market fit, right time, right place, that these guys can sell this. But the product itself worked well, did the job. It was just not your average way of having like a bunch of engineers and, coming from Stanford, building in San Francisco, and, that story was kind of the opposite of that.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. So I guess that was a question. Where were you when you started this? Were you in Boston? For some reason, I felt like you were back east when we met.
No, I was in San Francisco.
You were in San Francisco. Okay, I'm just insane. I guess I don't know why I thought you were back east.
I mean, I travel a lot for conferences, but yeah.
Yeah, I just have a poor memory. That's fine. I'm getting old. You start getting close to 40 and everything goes out the window. um, so that's so interesting. I mean, thinking about like that side of things, like, so when you, I mean, maybe this is getting too in the weeds, but like when you got the approval at your Series A, um, and they were okay with the way you had built the product, was there some um, agreement that you would start building an in-house team? Was that like part of the deal, or were they just like, we trust you, obviously you've done a good job?
No, I mean part of the Series A was let's start to hire some engineers and an engineering leader in the U.S. So, and that was kind of always the plan. And now we have engineers across the U.S. We've got some that we're going to be hiring in Europe, and we still have a huge engineering team in Pakistan as well. So that engineering center has always been a great place for us. But it was something that we knew we needed to bring. Some more of the amazing talent that's known in San Francisco into the team as we continue to scale it up and uh, 10x or 100x our product. So
Yeah, that's awesome. So this is a different kind of angle, I guess, on the early days of your product. When looking at an empire like Salesforce, right? Often it's said that, if you just looked at Salesforce and all the companies that built their products around Salesforce or around QuickBooks or around Microsoft or whatever, right? But there's kind of ecosystems that develop around there.
yep.
Would you consider yourself that, you kind of have Salesforce to thank for giving you the audience and the ability to integrate there for a cheap cost? Do you think you could have done it without Salesforce? I guess that's another way to ask that question.
No, I think we were 100% built on Salesforce in the beginning, and that was the story, that you could live in your CRM and still send stuff out. I think we couldn't have done this without Salesforce. Now Salesforce wasn't giving us any customers. Like, we're not like going out and like getting referrals from Salesforce, and I know, or at least in the early days. So it's not like, and we were getting a little bit of a lead here and there from the App Exchange, but there's tens of thousands of apps in there now, so it's not like you're just getting tons of inbound from Salesforce. But it was just more of the product was so easy to use and frictionless, and the data, and that was also part of the story, which was, you're currently sending gifts or swag offline. You're not really tracking it. It's kind of manual. And so the Salesforce story of tracking the ROI, making it one click, all that was a big part of the story.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So looking at, we have a question here. It's asking about the future for Sendoso. So I'd like to jump over to that for a second. So,
Sure.
I mean, you've got plenty of capital in the bank. Clearly, you've got momentum on your side. You've got solid product market fit. I mean, what does the next 5 years look like for Sendoso? I mean, what do you want to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, we just want to build a huge company and be, as ubiquitous as having a CRM. I think all companies need a sending platform like Sendoso to send out, direct mail, gifts, digital experiences to prospects, customers, and employees and partners. So, the cool thing is we started this thinking that this was going to be a kind of a sales use case. And we quickly realized that marketing wanted this, customer success, HR, and industries that we wouldn't think about in terms of hospitality, or we've got some sports and entertainment team customers. And so banking, and it's just a huge opportunity. And I think the world has changed and has been digitally saturated over the last decade with millions of emails, and it's harder to build personal rapport just through email. And so being able to send personalized gifts and notes and mail is just going to be another channel that every company will use because of the way we've made it so easy.
Yeah, well, I'm a believer. I remember the early days of being able to send automated cold email threads and how high the engagement was, just because no one expected it. And so, I mean, you could put these sequences out there and you just get responses through the roof. And you can still, to a degree do that today, but it's hard. Everyone's very aware and everyone knows how to set these things up. And so they can read through your low quality message pretty fast, right? But it's hard. I mean, it's hard to say that you faked sending someone a gift, right? I mean, That takes effort. It takes focus.
And it takes money, which I think is also the scenario with email is free. And so you feel like you could use it infinitely. But if you're going to send someone a thoughtful gift with a thoughtful note associated with it, you're not going to just kind of spray and pray. It's going to be more thoughtful. So I think it's a channel that costs money, and you can personalize it, and it's tangible, and there's a psychological component to all that too.
Yeah.
So, and that was a lot.
That's fantastic.
The other thing we didn't really talk about too is building the infrastructure for the product for actually managing our warehouses. So
I was just going to bring that up actually. Yeah.
So besides all the software we built that's pretty and kind of SaaS software that our senders see, there's some really interesting software behind the scenes for warehouse management, for order management, for drop ship fulfillment. So besides fulfillment through our warehouses, we also do digital gifts. So there's integrations into digital and e-gift card platforms. We also have thousands of what we call on-demand, so things like flowers or cupcakes, things that never hit our warehouse. We're also fulfilling through them as well. So we have this human plus automation fulfillment software that we use. So we almost have more software we've built that no one sees than what we have that people see.
That's awesome. So, I mean, effectively, those are two separate platforms then, right? I mean, they talk to each other, but the interfaces operate in different ways and all that stuff, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So there's, I'd say there's kind of three different softwares. The warehouse management software, there's kind of the order fulfillment management software layer, and then there's the SaaS software. So,
that's awesome. Okay. So you mentioned that, I mean, you count your employees who actually work in the warehouse. So these are your warehouses. You've got your own inventory. I mean, you're actually putting this stuff in packages and shipping them out. I mean, that's a lot of operation.
It is. And it's actually been pretty tricky to scale up because, again, you don't, when we first got started, our first warehouse was probably the size of a storage unit. And it's hard to want to go out and buy a 100,000 square foot facility if you don't have the money for it or the ability to fill it. So it was, went from a storage unit to 3 storage units to something that was about 5,000 square feet to something that was about 60,000 square feet to now we have our biggest warehouse is about 200,000 square feet. And then we have 5 other ones around the world that are kind of co-operated that also do a volume too. So it's been definitely interesting scaling that out, and then the software and processes to manage that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the process side, I mean, I'm kind of an ops dork. I like finance and operations. And I mean, ops, running operations like that efficiently, that's hard. I mean, may I ask about how many SKUs do you manage? If you were to measure them in SKUs, I mean, what are the options like?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about our business is we don't own any of the inventory. It's actually all of our customers' inventory that we purchase on their behalf. So we don't really have any inventory control. So tomorrow a customer could be like, order me 20,000 Yeti mugs, and we'll order it. So the unique part about that is we don't have to sit on inventory and wait for it to turn over. The hard part is it's almost impossible to forecast. And then we also don't know if a customer is going to send one thing tomorrow or 10,000 things. So then there's the labor and the management of all the employees that are picking and packing boxes. There's the going and picking it off the shelves. There's, this area used to have 50,000 Yeti mugs that got shipped out for Dreamforce last year. Now it's empty. What are we going to be able to fit in there? We don't know. So there's some really intricate stuff around lot control, around labor management, around picking and packing, and what's going to go in the box. How do we make it nice? How do we take what the customer wants and how do we convert that into something a warehouse worker can use visually to then pack the box in a perfectly nice way so that the unboxing experience for the recipient is amazing. So lots of, and then there's the handwritten component too, which is maybe it takes 2 minutes to go and find the gift off the shelf, but it takes 6 minutes or 10 minutes to write the note, and so they don't go at the same time. So you've got to make sure that you can coordinate that together.
Well, getting the right note with the right thing in the right box. I'm sure that there's opportunity for error there too.
Yeah, so we've done a lot of interesting kind of quality controls to make sure that we, get everything right too. So
Mm.
that was interesting too, building out in the beginning, because I had no warehouse background or no logistics. And so day one, when we had our first kind of warehouse, it was me trying to figure out what to do. And now we have like, experts from all around the world. We just hired this awesome logistics person from Lululemon and an awesome person from Levi and Nike. So we're able to like pull together the best of the best now. But oh man, in the early days, it was getting scrappy and figuring things out on my own.
Yeah. Well, I imagine the machine must be getting very efficient these days. That's amazing. Well, why don't we jump over to get some, kind of some words of wisdom. I mean, you've been through this last few years. It's been about 4 years, right, since you got this thing started.
Yeah.
A lot of founders that are in those early stages themselves. So based on what you learned, what your experience is, maybe even beyond product, what would be your advice or your learnings that you would want to pass along?
Yeah, I mean, even pre getting going, I'd say there's a lot of people out there that might have an interesting idea, but are just not confident in taking that next step to get it built, or like don't know an engineer. So hopefully I can be inspirational to say, hey, you can get a first product out there, or even to a Series A by using Upwork and finding an engineer that you can get matched with. And then, if there's good product market fit and you can sell it, get it to a point where you can then hire engineers that can sit next to you. So that's my first goal. You should never have an excuse. And one excuse shouldn't be like, I don't know engineers. Like, that's not an excuse. Look what I did. I'd say the early times can be troublesome at times, but for me and my co-founder, we were always kept a smile on our face and would always celebrate the micro moments. And so when I feel like every other day we were trying to like cheers to something, and it just kind of snowballed into something so much bigger. And so it's kind of the optimistic way of looking at things, but there's always something that breaks every day, and there's always something that is awesome. And learn from what breaks and celebrate the awesome stuff, and build a culture of celebration. And then I mean, the other one is like, you don't have to always raise money so early. I mean, we, spent a while just getting customers and getting traction, and then we were able to get much better terms from VCs because we already proved it out. So that was a good part for us early on too, and just getting customers and just selling it. And even before I launched it, actually, I launched Sendoso, my co-founder Braden and I were really selling a slide deck of mock-up screenshots and getting people to buy before it was even ready to go. And so we had it was something like $50,000 in so.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, you cut out right there at the end. So you said you had $50,000 in sales before you ever had a product. Is that what you were saying?
Correct. Yeah. So it just gave us good confidence that people wanted to buy this because a slide deck was enough to get them to sign off on a contract. So, and I guess that was to our advantage. Both our founders were salespeople, so we could, we were sales by nature.
You knew how to play that game. That's well, and I mean, I don't want to, undersell how important your sales background is. I mean, I would say in my past ventures where I did not succeed, it was because I didn't know how to sell. I didn't understand that the cycle of how to persuade someone to come in on something, especially when you have, no brand, not much to look at. You don't have a lot of marketing dollars. There's nothing pretty and shiny, and you still got to sell.
Yeah.
It's incredibly important to be able to pull people into that. So if I could ask one follow-up question, I mean, if they don't come from a sales background, what would you suggest for them to get into that sales mentality and not be afraid of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's different, I would just say start selling. I mean, start talking to customers, there's no better time to get into some cold emails. There's a lot of cool content online that you can find on how do I, start selling, or there's some sales classes you can take. So I think sales is one of the more crucial things, especially as it translates into then having to sell to VCs ultimately to get money. And then the biggest thing is really recruiting, which is ultimately sales too. And in the early days, I had to really sell employees that this was going to be the greatest thing, and you can leave your cushy job and work for less at this company that's, being run by a small group of people, and take the chance. So I think my sales background came in handy there too. But or get a sales mentor. I mean, I have tons of advisors and mentors now. Some are engineers, some are sales, some are finance. And, reach out to someone that, has a good sales background, and, spend an hour a week with them. And a lot of people like to mentor these days. So, find someone that can coach you and, read your cold emails, or sit on your call, or listen to your recording, and just do it.
Yeah. I love it. Just do it. Just go out and make it happen.
Yeah.
Well, I love your story, right? I mean, kind of summarize. I mean, so you started basically building a product from nothing, right?
Yeah.
And making it work, seeing if people wanted it. Well, I should step back even further. You did it yourself, right?
Yeah.
You were conducting this within your own world as a salesperson. It's something you wanted, and then you kind of hacked together something, which, I think your motivation is also interesting. You weren't motivated by building an enormous company. That's not why you did it. You did it for some beer money. And if it worked, awesome. So there was very little risk, which I think, mentally people get caught up in this. Well, it's not going to work because it's not this thing yet. Yeah. And you didn't get caught up in that. I love that. You built something that worked right now. You spent a small amount of money to validate it, and you got it to work, and we didn't really talk about your co-founder, but it sounds like in a way he was kind of an inspiration to you to maybe see past the beer money and think that maybe there's more here than I thought there was. Right.
Exactly.
So you're building first, you're selling hard at the beginning, you're generating revenue before you ever thought about outside dollars. You managed a product yourself, totally overseas, which is super unique in my opinion, of doing it well, not having an onshore technical person leading it. And then you got yourself into a place where you generated way more revenue than a typical seed stage company. So you got all the terms in your favor, you got great valuation, I assume, and it sets you up for even more success. So I love this path you went down, and what a critical way that your product played in that, and how you just owned it. So such a cool story. I'm really glad that we were able to get this out to everybody. It's really inspiring.
Me too. I'm glad we went deep dive. I love this kind of deep dive into the product. I haven't done one of these before, so I appreciate the in-depth nature of this, and getting into the weeds.
Yeah, well, my pleasure. We've got this thing recorded, and we're gonna make sure everybody sees it. So everyone that's on here, thank you. We appreciate you spending time. We'll get this thing, the recording up and up on the website if you want to go back and refer to it later, if you have access to that. We have 2 more interviews today coming up back to back off this one. An e-commerce company that's bootstrapped up to tens of millions of revenue, basically out of their house, out of Utah. And another one who I know very well, who's gone through some very rocky times during the pandemic and is coming out of it even stronger, which is a very inspiring story. So if you can stay around, we'd love to have you. If not, we'll have these interviews up for everyone to access. So again, Kris, thank you. You're the man. Enjoy Tulum, and go eat some tacos al pastor for me. They're my favorite.
See you, Jesse.
All right, see ya.